The courtroom was silent, but the tension was deafening. A single mother stood at the plaintiff's table, hands trembling, eyes exhausted. Not from fear, but from years of injustice. Across the room, a well-dressed businessman leaned back confidently, a smirk barely hidden on his face. Expensive suit, polished shoes, perfect posture. He believed this would be easy. He believed money could bury truth. He was wrong. The judge's voice cut through the silence. "State your name for the record." "Maria Alvarez." Her voice shook, but it was steady enough to be heard. And with those two words, the story began. Maria had worked for the defendant's company for 6 years. 6 long years of overtime. Unpaid weekends. Broken promises. She had trusted him, trusted the man who called himself a mentor. But when her husband died unexpectedly, leaving her alone with 2 children, she asked for what she was legally owed. Her unpaid commissions. Her benefits. The compensation she had earned. Instead of help, she was fired. No warning. No compensation. No mercy. The defendant claimed she had violated company policy. Claimed she was unprofessional. Claimed she was unstable. But Maria came prepared. She brought documents, emails, recorded calls, payroll discrepancies, and one detail the defendant never expected. The judge leaned forward, his gaze shifting to the other table. "Mr. Thompson, are you aware that withholding earned wages is a federal violation?" The confident smile faded slightly. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, shuffling papers, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Maria opened a folder and handed it to the bailiff. Inside were time-stamped emails where Mr. Thompson promised to fix the payment next quarter. Multiple quarters. Over 2 years. Empty promises turned into evidence. The courtroom shifted. The air grew heavier. This was no longer a small dispute. This was corporate exploitation. The defendant tried to speak, his voice less certain now. "Your Honor, she is exaggerating. She signed a contract." The judge interrupted, his tone sharp and deliberate. "And that contract does not override federal labor law." Silence fell like a hammer. Then came the turning point. Maria revealed something else. Something that changed everything. The company had received government relief funds during an economic crisis. Funds specifically meant to protect employee wages. Funds they accepted without hesitation. Funds they never used for staff. The judge's expression hardened. His jaw tightened. The room seemed to hold its breath. "So you received taxpayer assistance, and terminated an employee who requested her legal compensation?" No answer. The silence now belonged to the defendant. His polished exterior began to crack. The judge requested financial statements. Bank transfers. Internal memos. Documentation that couldn't lie. Within minutes, the narrative collapsed. It wasn't just unpaid wages. It was fraud. The defendant's confidence dissolved completely. His attorney looked down at the table, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. The judge removed his glasses slowly, deliberately. He looked directly at Mr. Thompson, and delivered the words that changed everything. "This court finds clear evidence of wage theft, wrongful termination, and misuse of federal funds." Maria covered her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. The courtroom waited. "I am awarding the plaintiff full compensation, back pay with interest, emotional damages, and referring this matter for federal investigation." Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered in disbelief. Another person nodded slowly, as if they'd been waiting years to see this moment. The gavel struck. Case closed. But the story didn't end there. As Maria walked out of the courtroom, tears streaming down her face, not of sadness but relief, reporters waited outside. Not because she was famous, but because justice had finally spoken for someone the system usually ignores. And the man who thought he was untouchable. He left through the back exit. No smile. No confidence. No control. Just consequences. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. It waits. It watches. It gathers evidence while arrogance assumes victory. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't whisper. It transforms lives. Maria's children would never know the weight their mother carried that day. But they would know something else. They would know that their mother fought. That she stood up when it would have been easier to walk away. That she believed in something bigger than fear. The businessman would face audits, investigations, questions he couldn't charm his way out of. His reputation, built on the backs of people like Maria, would crumble under scrutiny. But Maria, she would rebuild. Not just her finances, but her faith in a system that so often fails people like her. Because on that day, in that courtroom, the scales balanced. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to prove that truth, when backed by evidence and courage, can stand against wealth and power. Enough to show that one person, standing alone, can shift the entire room. And enough to remind everyone watching that justice, when it finally arrives, changes everything. The courtroom doors closed behind her. The chapter ended. But her story, her fight, her victory, would echo far beyond those walls. Because some battles aren't just personal. They're universal. And some victories don't just belong to one person. They belong to everyone who's ever been dismissed, exploited, or told they didn't matter. Maria Alvarez walked out into the sunlight. Head high, heart lighter, future uncertain, but no longer defined by someone else's greed. And somewhere, in another city, another courtroom, another person would hear this story. And they would find the courage to stand up too. Because that's what justice does when it speaks. It doesn't just close one case. It opens 1,000 doors.